Good morning, everyone. It is difficult to interrupt a group like this that appears to be having so much fun talking about trains and Livingston, Montana, but a big shout out to this community. Welcome to day 2 of the 4th annual Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority annual conference here in beautiful Livingston, Montana. I'm Dave Strohmeyer, Chairman of the Rail Authority. We are so delighted that all of you are filling the room here at the Depot Center in Livingston, and also for all of you online joining us from far-flung places across the nation. Yesterday, we started this conference by diving into a couple of topics. One, how is it that communities today, this very moment, can take the steps necessary to set themselves up for success for the future of passenger rail? And also for communities such as along the High Line here in Montana, communities served by the Empire Builder. How can you also play a role in making sure that that existing long distance service remains strong and remains a vital component of our communities on into the future? And how does all of that relate to high performance rail? High performance rail meaning how does both freight and passenger operations mutually benefit one another so that all rising tide rises all trains, I guess, in the case may be right here. So a great day, a great opener of our conference yesterday. I want to give a shout out to Western Skies Strategies, who hosted our event last night at Katabatic Brewing. Thank you, Western Skies. We have a great lineup for you today. Today, we're going to dive in just immediately, taking a hard look at what the Big Sky North Coast Corridor looks like by way of the planning process, by way of the overall federal landscape of policy before us, and really seeing this corridor that passes through Livingston, Montana, literally feet away from this building, how that will be a corridor of opportunity for communities from Chicago to the Pacific Northwest, and how this can become a reality and actually is becoming a reality as we speak. I'll let you all take a hard look at the conference agenda. If you have any questions, track down one of our staff or myself during breaks. Just by way of logistics, here in the conference center, and for those of you online, this is not going to be relevant to you, but somewhat ironically, the men's restroom is in the women's parlor over on this end of the building, and in the smoking room over here, the women's restroom there is there if you need to find that. We'll cap off the day, and you'll want to stay with us the entire day here. We'll cap off the day with a great historical bus tour of downtown Livingston, and we'll begin that with a little overview and a little bit of a teaser of the history of Livingston, and then move directly into the bus tour. More details on that will follow, and we'll cap off the entire day at the 1900 event venue for a conference reception at 6 p.m. One thing that folks online will want to be aware of is that if you're joining us via Zoom, please use the Q&A function to submit any comments or questions, and we'll make sure to get those integrated into the conversation for those sessions that have opportunity for Q&A and engagement with the audience. Finally, and there's always a couple finalies here, I want to give a big shout out to the Livingston Tourism Business Improvement District and the Northern Hotel and Billings as two of our signature sponsors and partners, not only for this event today, but for the Rail Authority in general. So if we could give those two signature sponsors a hand, that would be great. Also, during breaks, please do rotate around the room here. We have placards up also on your tables, but placards up around the room that identify those individuals, those groups, those organizations, those business and government partners who have made today's event and all of the work that we're doing really possible. I just want to give a shout out. Jess, raise your hand in the back. We have our executive director, Jess Peterson, joining us. Thank you, Jess, for everything that your team has done to make this possible. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the city manager of Livingston, Montana, Grant Gager, and he's going to provide a few welcome words for us. Grant.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you all for being in Livingston today. It's great to welcome you all to another beautiful day here. Livingston truly is a great Montana railroad town, and so it's hard to think of a better place for a gathering like this one. It really, this building and the downtown behind me really are what the community benefits that Bruce Agnew spoke about yesterday when he discussed the elements of high speed or high performance rail. And so it's hard to think of a better building for a gathering like this. And before we get into a great day of programming and an update on the corridor ID process from Abe, I think it's worth a minute to just take a look and take a moment and enjoy the building. My railroad career and government career actually started 20 years ago in a sister facility to this one, Grand Central Terminal. And the terrazzo walls and the big windows and the waiting room bench, you know, it really brings it all back for me. So it's great to have you here in this hub. And I encourage you all to get out and see downtown, because like I said, this really is about as good as it gets when we talk about the benefits of passenger rail. And I won't delay us any further. So Abe, I will turn it over to you to an update on the Corridor ID program.
Thank you, Grant, and thanks so much for the hospitality of Livingston, Montana. I don't know how many of you out there are from Montana or have never been to Montana before, but we welcome all of you. And as I mentioned to the audience yesterday, folks in my role are not always supposed to say, feel free to leave at any point. But as much as we want you in the room, if you need a break and want to wander around downtown Livingston, do a little shopping, get the blood flowing, please do so. This is a fairly informal event. If your stomach is growling, get up and get one of those breakfast burritos over there also, refill with coffee. But we're just glad that you're with us. And we're going to kick off today with really what is foundational for this, what we believe is a transformational and a once-in-a-generation project, and that is to basically restore a discontinued long-distance passenger rail route in the United States, which has never been done before and which we all are engaging in as we speak. We have our consulting team that is going to be briefing us on our involvement in the corridor identification and development program, which really is a big deal for all of us. And I want to turn it over to our project manager for this team, Abe Zumwalt.
Thank you, Maggie. Hi, my name is Abe Zumwalt, but I'm really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the team, because this corridor is a little big, and really when you get down to it, how do you eat a bison? Well, one bite at a time. And to come up and conceive of a team that could carve a bison up, we really had to think regionally. And so us at David Evans and Associates partnered with Quandel Consultants in Chicago alongside KLJ in Montana and North Dakota, as well as Steer, which is an international company that has done almost all of Amtrak's ridership modeling, to come up with a confabulation that could really tackle this from every angle. And today is kind of a rare occurrence because we actually have a representative from every core firm in the team. So to start with perhaps one of the more important members and embarrass her, Becky Rosenleaf is right back there, and she works hard enough, so we're not going to make her talk today. But in addition to that, we also have Tom Leach from Steer. I'm really glad to see representation from them, and we'll have him on a panel later today. And then, of course, up here with me on stage are Tessa and Frank of Quandel. And I think that if you've followed the process of this corridor and some of the other presentations we've done, I'm going to tell you a bottom line up front is the fact that the big news we expect to come will probably be later this month with our next scheduled meeting with Federal Railroad Administration, when we've been told that we will at least have preliminary comments on our submittal. But for those of you that haven't had the time to potentially watch several dry, very long presentations about the work being done, let's take a moment to get you up to speed. So I want to start here because it's like, what were we actually proposing when we threw this against the wall when the original notice of funding opportunity availed itself for the Corridor ID program? Well, this is a service restoration because this is technically a route that Amtrak used to serve. That's defined by statute. It's a long distance train, and this is a point that I make at every possible occasion, that the operating costs will be a federal responsibility and not a local one per present statute. That's really crucial, I think, for part of the purpose and need that we'll get to in a moment. But also, what really drew me to this project and what made me extremely excited about it is the fact that this is the first time we've really been able to think about what a long distance train should look like in the 21st century. Right now, Amtrak has done yeoman work on keeping the national network intact and alive, but the service model was really locked in with equipment purchases that were made in the last century, and we haven't been able to really be afforded the opportunity to think what the onboard service model should look like and how we can really hit every market. So in context, this organization was one of the few that really thought this way, because when you look at the overall Corridor ID submissions across the country, this is the only thing quite like it. There are 2 other long distance trains in the Corridor ID program, and those should be mentioned are Amtrak trains that presently run, although you'd be forgiven for thinking that they don't actually operate because they only operate 3 times a week. That'd be the line down there in the south, the Sunset Limited, as well as the Cardinal over on the East Coast running between Chicago and Washington, D.C. But really what we have here is something that is of a different scale and incentivized by different needs than other corridor ID programs that have more conventional justifications in congestion and urban growth. So let's get into the hard part here. If you look into what the Corridor ID program is, this is the structure that the Federal Railroad Administration came up with how we would codify and develop passenger rail corridors in this country. And I actually don't, this is a graphic that's all over the place, and I think that they did a good job trying to get their arms around a large topic, because you'll notice that Corridor ID is up front there. Then we have another program called the Federal State Partnership, and then the Restoration and Enhancement Program. And there are other federal programs referenced here that are applicable to these programs. But this doesn't really get at exactly what we're doing now and what it means, and how the FRA has defined this. To be really clear about what we're doing, I actually had to annotate this. So there are 3 steps in the Corridor ID process, of which we're in the first one, right? Before we can even get to systems planning and project planning, we have to write a statement of work and assemble a budget and a schedule for how long a service development plan, which actually comprehends systems planning, project planning, priorities. And really, this is the reason why we have this additional arrow. This is what almost every other corridor that you see on that map that I shared earlier is going through right now. It's a negotiation of a statement of work with the federal government. And that is what step 1 is about. I've been asked questions like, when will we see the step 1 report? And the fact of the matter is, we won't have a report. What we will have is a negotiated statement of work with the Federal Railroad Administration. Now, a lot of these are going to look the same, and if you're curious about what's involved in a statement of work, per the framework that the Federal Railroad Administration has advised. This is a public document. You can go through it, and you'll notice it's quite intensive. It has route options and service options, as well as ridership development modeling, and just all of these different components compiled into 9 major overarching tasks that have to be completed to check every box. And at the end of the day, have a corridor inventory. Now that's the big part, right? What we're all gaming towards is working with Burlington Northern Santa Fe, as well as the other host railroads in the eastern end of the corridor, and come up with the sufficient capital projects to enable us to start service. That's the overarching picture of what we're doing. But right now, where we are is we've taken this and we've codified it into something custom. There are a lot of concepts in this that we're very excited about. I'm going to touch on them briefly, as well as some other concepts that I think we may get some slight pushback on. But overall, given the profile of this corridor and given its individuality, it was necessary to tailor FRA's statement of work to the nature of this corridor. And that's where we are now. When I said that we're meeting with the FRA at the end of this month and we anticipate comments, this is what we anticipate comments on. It's really the structure of what the next phase of the work is going to be. So, initial concepts to touch on lightly. One of the big purpose and needs of this project is filling a gap in our nation's transportation infrastructure, and that's a crucial part of it. A lot of underserved areas, a lot of areas that, for a lot of the reasons that you've heard and a lot of the attendees of this conference are intimately familiar with, unreliable corridors in the wintertime, certain rural isolated communities, medical travel for essential purposes, all of these things are valuable parts of filling the gap. But other parts of this also have to do with the nature of the Amtrak network at present. Now, this is not our train. This is not the Big Sky North Coast Corridor. This is the Empire Builder. And this is present data about what passengers riding the Empire Builder today through the northern part of Montana would do were the train not running. And I think that this defies a lot of expectations and also defines potentially a draft profile of what some passenger traffic might look like on this corridor as well. What's fascinating about this is that we see like 44% of the passengers in Montana would be driving, so instantaneously a far more dangerous mode of transportation. An amazing, more than a third would be flying, so that's a lot of people spending more money than they probably have to for essential transportation. Then finally, we have 20% of people that wouldn't make the trip at all, and that is pure economic development because those are trips that wouldn't occur, and so your money not spent. And that you can see variations of this pie chart across the entire corridor. I want to make the point that those green slices, that's bus travel. Our competitor is not the bus. We're taking aim at inefficient plane flights that make it so you have to fly to Salt Lake City to get to Boise, or non-existent bus options in Montana, or 18 times more dangerous interstates. So this is another essential part of why long distance trains are interesting. I'm not going to expect you to read all of this. The slide deck will be provided afterwards. But this is another fundamental concept, and it's talking about trip pairs. On a corridor this long, we're going to have as many as 400 potential trip pairs. That is how long distance trains scale. A short distance corridor, like say Amtrak Cascades between Seattle and Portland, will scale by offering more frequency. They want to make the corridor run as many as 16 times a day. That's great. We achieve that scale by pure length, and that's another way that this will justify itself. But we'll intensify that with innovations like, say, multiple daily frequencies so nobody is served exclusively in the middle of the night. Another aspect of this is the fact that when we look at the history of long-distance train provision, we see some interesting aberrations. When Amtrak initially took over all of the privately operated passenger trains, the Southwest Chief, formerly the Super Chief, basically made its operations cost back. And this was an era when they ran something like 15 to 18 sleeping cars. Completely different model from what we do today. Alternatively, right now, this year, the auto train will cover all of its operations expenses through another source of revenue, which is all of the car fees. There are different ways that we can structure these routes, and there is potentially more innovative ways that we can think about how to operate one of these routes to serve all markets, but also potentially to make the footprint of the operations expense much lighter than most would expect. And to this point, I'd like to pass it over to my colleagues at Quandel to walk through another key concept, this one less about purpose and need and more about planning principles themselves. So after this, Tessa, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tessa, and I'm on the consultant team with Abe, Frank, and others. And before I was a consultant, I was at the Federal Railroad Administration with Frank as well. And so we've been able to see both sides of the Corridor ID program, from the inner workings of how to get this up and running at FRA to how it actually gets executed by the sponsors. And I do want to highlight, before I get into this map, how impressive it is to be in the Corridor ID program. While we were at FRA, we had the opportunity to review applications and decide who would get selected for this. 69 sponsors are in the program today, and they all put in a ton of work to get here. They were long applications. It included letters of support, telling your story, convincing the FRA that you can get the work done. So I just want everyone to know that it's a significant deal to be in the Corridor ID program. Also, this is the most money that passenger rail has seen in over 50 years. So the program itself has $34.5 million right now to disperse amongst 69 corridors, and there is more in the pipeline. So we will be seeing more passenger rail corridors in the future, most likely. Now, what FRA has seen is this route. So this is the route that they're managing for the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. And as you can see, there are circles on the route. They pivot in different directions. This is not the final route. This is representing where are the decisions that need to be made. And currently there are 7 decisions, as you can see. Wait, did I count that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I think that might be a subsequent slide, but that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute, there's more. Well, what we do know about this route is it will terminate in Chicago as an endpoint, and we do know that it will terminate in either Portland or Seattle. We also know some of the service markets that it will serve for sure, and that includes Milwaukee, St. Paul, Fargo, Bismarck, Billings, and Missoula. So those are known. But as you can see, there's still subject of question. So will it go to Paradise, or will it go to Helena? Will it go to Butte? Will it go to Minneapolis? Will it go to Eau Claire? Will it go to Madison? So there's a route analysis is a huge part of the service development planning. And that is an extensive amount of work. Just to give you some idea of what it will involve, modeling, and not the modeling where you get behind a camera and do your glamour shot, but data modeling, or RTC modeling for the engineers in the room. And that will include all of the operations on the rail today, including existing operations, freight in passenger, and anticipated operations for the future. But that in itself will involve host railroad involvement, local government involvement, other state governments who are in the Corridor ID program, and the FRA. Host railroad negotiations will be a huge part of this because you need host railroad support. Environmental considerations, that's another big part of the route options analysis, particularly the National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA. So working with the FRA that's a huge component of all of this, is you have to pass through all of your NEPA laws and regulations. The communities. The communities play a very big role in the route options analysis. Communities, stakeholders, local governments. In fact, there are 3 parts of the service development planning that are specific to engagement. So for those who do want to be involved and do want to participate in what route makes the most sense, there's a ton of opportunity for that. Demand. So where is the demand? Who's going to ride the train? Where does it make most sense to go? And feasibility, because I think we want to make sure that this actually gets up and running. So where is there the path of least resistance will be considered as well in the route options analysis, just to give an idea of how extensive the planning can be. Also, let's see here. I do want to put a plug in for learning more about the other programs that are in the Corridor ID program. So if you go to railroads.dot.gov, and then there's a Corridor ID story map, and you can see an interactive map of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authorities, but you can also see where there are overlaps. So I'm going to talk about some of the other programs that directly overlap with this route. And if you want to look at it more, you can go to railroads.dot.gov. The first one is the Cascadia High Speed Rail. So that one is being sponsored by the Washington DOT. So there will be a lot of coordination with them. The second one is the Twin Cities TCMC, which is being sponsored by the Minnesota DOT. And that's where we see the Minnesota circle. So you can explore more of that. And then in Wisconsin, there are 4 overlapping Corridor ID programs. One is being sponsored by the Eau Claire County, a local government, and the other 3 are being sponsored by the Wisconsin DOT. So there is going to be, unlike other routes, this is long distance, and there is overlapping corridors too that have to be considered in the route options analysis. Now I'm going to pass it on to you, Frank, to continue.
So I think the message that Tessa is trying to get across is that we have a long corridor that's a little bit complicated when it comes from the standpoint of planning. So the way that we're approaching this is sort of a 3-step process where we are looking at the corridor in 3 geographic chunks, if you will. Push. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So step 1 is to take a look at basically the middle of the route. We pretty much know that we are going to be, I don't think I did that. There. Okay. We know that the route is going to involve North Dakota and Montana. There are a couple of places in Montana where we've got to make a decision about where we're going to operate. And the issues are between Logan and Harrison and between Paradise and Missoula. So step 1 is to firm up the route in the middle, if you will, Idaho, Montana, and North Dakota. Then we need to take a step back and look at each end. Now, there's a lot of complications on each end, where on the western side, we need to work closely with the Washington DOT, the Oregon DOT. We have to coordinate with the Cascade route as well. There are 3 options that need to be looked at. Each one of them has their advantages. There are good points to each one of them. And what we want to do is make sure that we've got the right one. And so that's part of our second step. At the same time, on the eastern end, it's even more complicated because not only are there alternative routes, but there are alternative projects. So we have to deal with the Wisconsin DOT on their proposal for an additional train between Minneapolis and Chicago. Recently, we started the Borealis, which is the first state-sponsored train to be initiated in decades, and has been very successful. And so a partnership between Wisconsin and Minnesota looking at trying to add service there. But that train follows the same route that we think that we would be using for the North Coast. We also have proposals to serve Madison, Wisconsin. Right now, the Empire Builder bypasses Madison, Wisconsin, and obviously that's the capital of the state. So they're looking at how to make that work. Eau Claire County for many years has been trying to get a commuter rail line between Eau Claire and Minneapolis. But this is now their opportunity to not just have a commuter rail line, but actually be part of a long distance service. And where this Where the North Coast comes into play is a couple of ways, is that we are proposing more than one frequency. And so when we get to Minneapolis and we get east of Minneapolis, are we going to follow the same route for both services? Are we going to send one to Eau Claire and one to Madison? These are all questions which are just way beyond our ability to deal with right now, because we have to work very closely with Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois. And finally, between Milwaukee and Chicago, there's the existing Hiawatha service. And that's another location where for many, many years, more than 15 years, we've been working on expanding the frequency of the Hiawatha from 7 trips per day to 10 trips per day. But that's a very, very congested corridor. And the way that we got the Borealis to work, at the time, Tess and I were both working for the Minnesota Department of Transportation and working with Wisconsin to get Borealis up and running. And the way we did it is that we actually extended one of the Hiawathas so that we didn't add trips between Milwaukee and Chicago. We just took one of the existing trips and extended it. So is that one of the options for North Coast? These are all questions that need to be dealt with. So we're taking this 3-step approach where we're going to look, first of all, make sure we got the center figured out, because the center is what's going to be, connecting to both the east and the west. And then finally, once we have all of these issues, then we can come together and put together a complete service proposal that responds to all of these issues.
All right, thank you, Frank. In the interest of time, I propose that we move to questions before moving on to the next session. And I had a feeling I was going to see your hand. That's great. Can we get a microphone over to Mr. McIntosh? Oh, I don't think it's on. I'm sorry.
Which one?
There you go. You got it.
Just 1, 2.
Mhm.
Anyway, thank you guys for coming. I had a question and a comment for Abe. I think one of the most stunning slides I ever saw coming to these conferences was last time, where you showed a slide of the Southwest Chief, which had a train set of, I think it was 18 cars. And now I've been on the Southwest Chief and it's like 6 or 7 at the most. What happened to cause the virtual collapse of these size train sets? And the second question is, like the Zephyr, I know that I've ridden on the Zephyr. I know they could make that train 3 times bigger and they would fill it. And I just, what caused this just drastic reduction in the size of these consists?
Well, sir, you honor me by asking me that question, because as it turns out, we're going to have a few panels that will actually beat around that precise issue. There are also people here you might want to speak to. I think Chase over here, Chase Kitchen from Amtrak, everybody, is, I think, a fabulous employee over there that can gain light to that. But overall, to answer your question from the way I see it, Amtrak was right in the era when you wouldn't think it would happen, in the Carter administration when we lost this train, as well as in the Reagan administration, and during Bush 2, or Bush 1 rather, we got an historic infusion of long distance equipment. And we had a priority to do that, as well as a rail manufacturing industry that could produce it. What has happened since then has been a lot of fits and starts for the production and capacity of rail passenger cars. We have lost our internal capacity to do so on a grand scale, except, of course, for the Railcar Roundtable you'll be hearing later on today with the 2 active manufacturers of passenger rail equipment. Stadler and Siemens are working pretty hard to begin to fill the gap. Both Amtrak and Via Rail have they're working on, I think, somewhere between RFI and RFPs for re-equipment of their individual long distance fleets. But we're making up for my lifetime, basically 3 decades plus, where we haven't seen a meaningful inclusion apart from the CAF order of new Viewliner equipment. I think that if Amtrak could run a longer Coast Starlight or California Zephyr, I mean, I don't want to speak for them as they're here, but I believe that they would very happily do so if they could. So it's just a question of availability and being able to backfill. And that's a big question for this route as well. The image I love to use is actually one that Via Rail came up with after its talks with equipment manufacturers for how they're going to re-equip the Canadian. And the question of what kind of equipment we're going to use, as well as how many classes of service we want to be able to serve, are all really important questions that we look forward to answering in step 2 of the process. So.
Hi, thanks for coming. I'm glad to see that I'm from Butte, and so we're in step 1. And can you tell me how we can get more involved and get our case made to the corridor RD and SDP and whatever? And I know we'll get the communities involved, but any other clues as to where we need to go?
Absolutely. And I think that the next session is going to be of not only special interest to that point, but of crucial importance for this project and every other CID project going forward. This effort has been a historic level from the grassroots and coming out of the woodwork here in Montana, North Dakota, and Idaho. But right now we're making sort of a leap into the federal arena to guarantee funding. I would love to ride a train over Homestake Pass someday. That would be a dream. But to do that, we need a lot of funding, and to achieve that, we need a surface transportation reauthorization, which allows us to think expansively and abundantly about passenger rail expansion. And so I think that the next segment talking about reauthorization principles, but also I believe that there's going to be some sort of action alert that everybody at this conference can take part in. That I think would be the most expedient and direct way to effectuate some alternatives for you. Butte is a great market, and from what I hear, a beautiful place. I've never been, I'm sorry to say. Yeah.
If I could just add on to that. Going all the way back to when I was working at MnDOT in working on projects like this, and people would ask that kind of question, how can I get more involved? And to me, what's the most essential thing is that you make sure that your elected officials know what you're thinking and make sure that they understand the passion behind what you're trying to achieve. I used to tell my planning students all the time that planners don't really make decisions. Elected officials make decisions, and the better job the planners do in providing information, the better decision that elected officials can make, but they also make their decision based upon you. And just make sure that you know who represents you and make sure that they are you're absolutely certain that they understand what you need. Thank you.
Gregory, do we have any online comments or questions yet? No. We have time for maybe one more question before we move into the next session. Any other questions from folks? Okay, thank you, project team.